Hey guys, welcome back. In today's video, we'll be building a Pokemon Codex. This Pokemon Codex is inspired by a developer that I follow on YouTube. His name is Florent Poppen. He has created this Codex application using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So I've decided I'm going to do the same application using React. But before I actually go ahead and start the coding, I need to confess to you guys that I almost didn't record this video. Why, you may ask? I found a Codex that blew my mind, a codex that made this one feel much inferior to it by the look, the feel, and just the way that it works, the functionality of it. If you guys would like to see that codex, I suggest that you stay to the end of this video, because at the end of this video I'll be showing you that codex, the way it works, the way it pulls information, and the way it lays it out. Sound interesting? Stay to the end of this video. Go ahead now and open up your favorite code editor. I'm using Visual Studio Code. You can open up the terminal and you can go ahead and create a new React app by running npx create-react-app space and call it whatever you want to call it. I called mine Pokemon Codex. And once you have done that, you are ready now to follow along with this video. So I'm going to go ahead and just run mine to see if everything has downloaded correctly. So I'm going to run yarn.start. And let's quickly have a look. So it's starting my development server, and we should have the React default boilerplate that React gives you. And there we go, the nice spinning React logo. So let's go ahead and take a look at the file structure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove all the files that I'm not going to use, which is app.css, app test, logo svg, report web vitals.js, and setup test. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete those files that I'm not going to use. It's going to give me an error. I'm going to go ahead to index.js, just remove this as I'm not going to use it. Remove this import as that file doesn't exist anymore. Save it. Let's go to app.js, remove these imports that we're not going to use, and remove everything in here. So let's go ahead and just add an h1 tag. And I'm going to call this Pokemon Evolution. Let's save it and let's see if it's run correctly. Just gonna refresh it. There we go, Pokemon Evolution. Nice. So I'm gonna go ahead and start setting up my CSS classes and my divs that I want to use in this application, because I already went ahead and copied my CSS from the example that you guys have seen and pasted it inside my index.css over here. Okay, so I can go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to change this firstly to app-container. I'm going to save it. Let's quickly see if that takes any effect. There we go. So as you guys can see, it's display flex, align item center, and justify content center. Now let's go ahead and create my divs that are going to contain or hold all of my Pokemon. So the first div I'm going to create, I'm going to say div class name, not class name. Div class name, and this one is called Pokemon Container. Close it, and inside of this Pokemon Container I'm going to have another div. So my div tag, I'm going to say class name. This one is just going to have all of the Pokemon. So I'm just going to call it all container, and this is where I'm going to loop out all of my Pokemons, and below it I'm going to have my button to load more. So I'm going to add and say button, and I'm just going to add the text saying load more, and I'm going to add its class, which is actually straightforward. The class is also called load-more. Okay, so let's save it. This is not any rocket science. You should just see the button load more right at the bottom. So nothing really interesting happening over here, except just straightforward boilerplating. Let's quickly have a look at the function that we are going to use to get this Pokemon. So we're using an API called PokeAPI. That's where we're going to get all the information from the Pokemon. So let's quickly set that up. So I'm going to go ahead and say right here, say const all Pokemons, because I want an array that's going to save all of that. Set all Pokemons by using the useState. So I can go ahead and say use state. So let's see, auto imported, that's nice. And I'm going to set this as an empty array. So I'm declaring this variable as an empty array. Okay. And the second thing that I do know is that I do have a load more button over here. So let's go ahead and set that up as well. So I can go ahead and say const load more set load more is equal to useState. So this is also going to useState, and it's going to be actually the URL. Okay, so I'm going to set this load more to the default URL that I'm going to use to get all of these Pokemons, which is https pokeapi.co/API/v2/Pokemon, and I'm just going to add a limit to this to only give me 20 Pokemons. Okay, so I have 20 Pokemons. There we go. Now I have that. So the next thing that I want to do is that I know for a fact that on load, I actually want the Pokemons to be loaded on load. Okay, so I'm going to first go ahead and create that function that's going to do that for me. So I'm going to create a function. I'm going to call it const get all Pokemons, which I'm just going to make an async function. Okay, so what it's going to do, it's going to say const the response. So I'm just going to say res is equal to await for the response from this fetch. If you're using Reactjs, if you install the Reactjs package, this is just going to be await Reactjs and the URL obviously. So in my case, the URL, it's already saved into this variable called load more, so I can just copy that, paste it there. So that's going to use this URL over there. And I can go ahead and say const data is equal to the response.json, and that's the data that I currently have. And what I want to do is I want to log this out. Let's see if this actually works. So I go ahead and say console log clg console.log data. I can see if this logs out. Let's do it by saying once the page refreshes, please log this out, and we can use a hook called useEffect for that, which is this hook over here, useEffect, which is the same as component did mount more or less. So once the application runs, it's gonna run this useEffect. So let's go ahead and remove this. I don't need that. I only need to call this function on load. So I'm going to pass to that function over there, and I'm not going to use this hook again, so I can remove this. So basically what this hook does is to say I can look at any of these variables if they change, if the value changes. So let's say this value change, I can insert it in there, and if it's in there, this hook is going to run again as soon as that value change, and it's going to run again once that value change. But if this array is actually empty, it's only going to run once, and that's on load, and that's what I want at the moment. Okay, so let me save this. Let me pull up here my developer, my console. useEffect is not defined, so basically on top it did an auto import. So I'm just going to say useEffect and save it. So once I've saved that, everything should be running. I just need to refresh this. There we go. And what I've done is I need to say wait over here as well, because now I'm just getting the promise back. I actually need to wait till all of that resolved, and as you guys can see, I'm getting an object with a next value to it that I can use, and also a result, which is actually an array of all the 20 Pokemons that I've called for. So now that I know is once I click on the load more button, I need to have set it to the new or to the next URL. So what this next URL says, it says, okay, now you've loaded 20 Pokemons. Let's load the next 20. Okay, so there's no need for me to go and save the offset into a variable and then just increment that offset to make sure that I get the following batch and increment it again. I can just use this next value that's been given to me. So I can go ahead and do that by just saying set load more, set load more, seems I can't spell tonight. Set load more, and I can save that into data dot next. There we go. So I'm saving this load more to data.next. So now this is going to automatically update to say 20 limit, but the offset is going to be 40. If it's clicked again, it's going to be 60, etc. Now that I have that, the following thing that I need to do is, if we take a look close at what is being returned in this array, is just the name of the Pokemon and a URL with an ID. So this URL with an ID is where you get more stats about that specific Pokemon, which means that we need to call this API again, but now pass through a variable to it. And how we can do that, you can just loop through this array and call it for each of these Pokemons and save that object of stats into the same array. Let's quickly go ahead and see how we're going to do that. We can do that by calling a function, and this function I'm just going to call create Pokemon object, and what I'm going to pass through is result. Okay, and just below it, let me call it, so I can go ahead and say create Pokemon object, and the result I'm passing through is actually this array, this result array. So I can go ahead and say data dot result. Okay, so I'm putting this data dot result in there as a param. So let's go ahead and do that. So I can go ahead and say result dot for each. So for each of these, do the following. Say create an async function, because I'm going to call the API again. Create an async function Pokemon. I'm just putting it between brackets so it's more readable. This is actually unnecessary within US 6, 7. You can actually leave it like that, but for readability purposes, I'm just gonna put it right there so you can make actually sense what I'm doing. So now I'm gonna say const response is equal to await. I'm gonna do the same thing right as on top. I'm gonna say fetch, and now the URL is gonna be the same. The only difference now is that I am passing through a value. So I can go ahead and say backticks and say Pokemon $$ to pass through a variable, and that variable is going to be this Pokemon. So at this current index, get Pokemon and its name. So I'm saying at index 0, get that name and pass that name through. Okay, that's what it's doing. I'm press Ctrl B just to close my sidebar. And let's go ahead and do the following. So now I can go ahead and say const data it's equal to response.json, but I need to await this as well, or else I'm gonna be stuck with a promise. There we go. Now that I have all of that, I'm just gonna set this into this array right there on top. Okay, now I'm gonna go and do that. I'm gonna say set all Pokemon and data. Okay, so this is an object of the single Pokemon. Okay, we have to keep in mind that now we are looping through an array, right? If we do it this way, we're going to end up with an array with just one object, because every time it loops through, it's just going to replace what we currently have in there with the new one until we're at 20, and 20 is going to be the only one left in there. So what we need to do is just go ahead and say, I'm going to go ahead and say current array or current list. It's a current list, and I'm going to use a spread operator to say get the current list or whatever it's in this current array, and just push this new one at the end of it, this new object at the end of this array. Okay, so basically what I'm doing here, it's saying getting all Pokemons. Let me just copy that. I'm saying getting all Pokemons dot push that object. Okay, that's basically what I'm saying here. Get the current array, current list of Pokemon, spread it out, and at the end of that list, just add this new object. That's what's happening there. And now that I've done that, what I need to do is, let's just see what we currently have. Let's log it out. So I'm just gonna say wait console.log. I'm just gonna paste this through all Pokemon. So let's save this. Let's remove that. Let's quickly see what we have. On access property for each result is undefined. There we go. So basically it was results and not result. Okay. Remove all of this. Why are we okay? I need to actually move this out of that for each function and just below calling that function. Sorry about that, because I want to show you guys the object. So if I open up this array, now you will see that it made a call to the Bulbasaur that we actually got back here, and then now I have an object of that Pokemon with its abilities, its form, its height, its ID, its name, its species. Now I get more information about its specific Pokemon, and I saved it into an array. So that's what this function has done here for me. Okay, so now we have information we can go ahead and loop out into the page. So let's look at looping that out. So I'm going to go ahead and close my developer console. I'm not going to use that anymore. And we're going to look at creating a new component that we want to use to loop everything out. So I'm going to ahead and go here, create a folder called components. And inside of this folder called component, I'm going to create a file called Pokemon thumbnails of thumbnail.js. And I'm going to say React function component export, which is going to generate me a function with export. You can actually go ahead and do the following and say React arrow function export. Now I have an arrow function of it. It's cool. It's cool. I'll show you guys where this comes from in a minute. So if we take a look quickly at the previous one, we know that we need its ID, we need its image, the name, and also the type of the Pokemon. So let's quickly take a look at those. The way we can do that, we can go ahead and destructure over here and say pass through an ID, pass through a name, pass through an image, and also a type. Okay, so that's what's going to get passed through as props to this component. And let's quickly style out this component. Let's say in this I'm going to give it a class name, and this guy's class name is going to be thumb container, and inside this one we're going to have another class or another div with a class name, and this class name I'm just going to call number, which is going to be that number right on top. And inside this I'm going to have HTML small text just for the text to make it small. I say ID 0 and ID. So this ID is going to be whatever's been passed through as this Pokemon's current ID. And just below that number, what I'm going to have is an image tag to generate the image for me. So the image source, it's going to come from this image over here. And I can go ahead and add an alt to it if I wanted to. And the alt, I'm just going to call the alt of Pokemon's name. And below this image I'm going to have another div which is going to wrap the other information for me, the class name. So this one I'm going to call, sorry, it's going to be quotation mark detail wrapper, and I'm going to have an h3. So inside of my h3 I'm going to echo out the Pokemon's name, and below its name I'm just going to go ahead and echo out small the type. So I'm going to say type, and it's going to be the type of that Pokemon. Alright, so this is my component. I'm going to save it and go back to my app.js and import that component in here. So let's quickly take a look at this. If I go ahead and say all Pokemons, which is this array over here, all Pokemons dot map. So I want you to map through all of those Pokemons and just say Pokemon and return me list item of its names by passing through Pokemon dot name. Save it, and let's quickly see if it returns to me the Pokemon's name in the list item. Add Pokemon, sorry, that's supposed to be all Pokemons. Alright, so as you guys can see, there's all Pokemons. I'm just gonna change this class over here so that they're not displayed in next to each other but below each other. There you guys can see, so I am getting my Pokemons and they are showing right there, all good. So now let's go ahead and instead of doing it in a list item, let's pass it through into that component we just created. So I can go ahead and do the following inside of this component. I call that component Pokemon thumb, and let's see that it imports automatically. Yes, it's imported right there from components. That's my component over there. I'm going to pass through the values that I've asked for, which firstly was an ID, secondly was a name, and then an image, and then a type, and lastly, because it's going to give us React is going to mount for a unique key, I'm going to have to pass through a unique key over here, and I'm just going to use the current index for this Pokemon by passing a second param over here, calling it index, copy, paste index over there, Pokemon. So I'm just going to copy that, say Pokemon ID, and the name, it's going to be name. Those other ones are straightforward, but those two are a bit tricky. So with those two, we're going to need to go ahead and check out the response. So for image, I'm just going to open one up. So firstly, image is in a sprite, and that sprite we want to go to other, dream world, front default, because this SVGs are a bit bigger and they're better quality. So I can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to say Pokemon dot sprites dot other dot, so I'm right here by other dot dream world, dream underscore world, and lastly front underscore default. So that's the image and the type. So for the type, I'm going to need to go ahead and say types. So let's do that. Let's say Pokemon dot types, and type is actually an array with two objects. So I'm going to take the first type. So let's say array at position 0, which is the first position, and I'm going to take the type. So the type is actually dot type, it's an object, and inside of this object I'm going to say name to get that what type it is. So I'm going to say name. So now I have the grass type. Okay, so if I save this and I close all of this, let's quickly see. Right, so as you guys can see, my Pokemons are loading, but the background colors aren't loading. So what I wanted to do is to say, depending on what type the Pokemon is, that background color must have that effect. And the way I'm going to go ahead and do that is by thumbnails. I'm going to go ahead and create a new variable, and I'm going to call this const style, and the style is going to take in the type, which is going to be that. So I'm going to say type. I can actually do backticks. I can say dollar, take this class over here, thumbnail container, and add the type to it. So I can go ahead and say dollar brackets type. So I'm passing to that type as well. Okay, and then I can use this variable instead of the string over here. So I've added the curly braces. Let me go ahead and say save, and let's refresh this. Let's see what we have. So once we refresh it, you guys can see my grass type Pokemons, they have this greenish background. My fire type Pokemons has this pinkish background, and my bug has this kind of brownish background, while my normal has this grayish background. I did not hook up my load more button, so my load more button is not doing what it's supposed to do because I haven't hooked it up. And the way I'm going to go ahead and do that is just add an on-click function to this. So I can go ahead and add this on-click function and say, once I'm on click, just call this get all Pokemon function again. That's all it needs to do. So let's say save. Let's refresh. Let's quickly see. So we have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 19, 20. Load more, and as you see, immediately we are loading more Pokemons, and you can keep loading more, and loading more. Nice. That's the end of this tutorial. Let's quickly have a look at that codex. So here we are at, I don't know how to pronounce that, github.github.io Pokedex, which is an awesome layout that he has done. So you have a button here where you can click to just refresh everything, and it's in a card format. You can drag it to the right, you can drag it to the left, you can click on this info icon over there, and it expands and it gives you the information about the specific Pokemon and also its evolution as it evolves. So this is just not just thumbnails. You can actually go ahead and click on it, because if you do click on it, it gives you the information about that specific evolution of that Pokemon. Awesome. That's what I said. So yeah, you guys can go ahead and play around with this Pokemon Codex, or Pokedex as it's called. And I'm just gonna zoom in here so you guys can kind of see the URL. Guys, so my browser, I'm gonna zoom in, that's fine, but the URL is right over there if you guys want to go ahead and play around with it. Until next time, guys, stay safe.